Our next speaker, or speakers, let me be plural. I actually had the privilege of meeting a few years ago when I went to visit a prison. And this young man, just, he's impressive because God got a hold of him. That's just all I can say. I'll let him tell you the rest. And he's got a beautiful wife. The two of them, they are doing some awesome things, have done some awesome things, and God is using them in mighty, mighty ways. I'm going to let them tell you the story. But Stan, if you've seen some of our videos, he's in about 4 of them. He's the bald-headed dude that talks about the cookies. Right? Go on my Kairos and look at the cookie video and some of the different things. So I'm going to ask Stan, who just got out in October. Praise God. And they came over to join us and share with you all tonight. So I'm going to ask Stan and Amy to come up and just bless our socks off.
You ready? You can stand over there. That's your notes. That's your man. I was doing life in prison. That's what the world told me. That's what I told myself. That's what I told my wife. That's what my family thought. That's what all my friends, everybody who loved me knew I was doing life in prison. At 17, I went to prison. I went to a grown man's prison and had to learn how to grow up real quick. In doing that, I pushed a lot of people away. In doing that, a scared, fearful, hopeless kid is probably one of the most dangerous things you can come across. You see that in society today. And that's who I was. In 1987, I went to prison with a 20 to life and was told I would probably never get out. That's why standing up here looking at you guys is it's a miracle. It's a miracle. I did a lot of things that I regret in prison. I did a lot of things I regret to my family, to society, there's a lot of things that I can never take back. You know, as I went through those first years in prison, I learned how to survive. That's all prison was for me. That's all it was. When Alan came up and started telling his story, I thought he was talking about me. Man, I went to prison. I knew how to fight. I knew violence. That was who I was. It's who I was. Man, I was one of the leaders of one of the most notorious gangs in prison. I thought I was grown. I thought that's who I was. I thought that as long as people feared you, they respected you. As long as people respected you, they loved you. And that was me. That was me. until one day someone came into my life. And for most guys, and probably women, but I can speak for the men, if a warden comes up to you and talks to you, it's usually a bad thing. It's usually not a real good thing. But, about 13 years into my bit, I was offered the chance to go to a Kairos weekend. I was offered the chance to experience this weekend. I turned it down. I looked at prison as survival. I didn't look at it as anything but. And see, one of my mentors that I looked up at as a father figure, he went through a weekend right before this, and he turned his back on the gang, and I won't get into all of that, but it was because of God entering into his life that we didn't do what we were supposed to do. And I'm sure you've heard it, blood in, blood out. And nobody laid a hand on him because word got back to us that we shouldn't mess with something that God's doing. And I didn't understand that because I thought I was God. And I wasn't doing anything, and that was the problem. And so the same guy that went through that weekend, the same guy that turned his back on us, the same guy that, man, I had looked up to for years and had taught me all of the violence that I knew, or most of the violence that I knew. He wanted me to go through this weekend, and I refused, and he spoke to me several times. And in the process of him doing that, I go to the hole, solitary confinement. I'm in the hole for my 5th or 6th dirty urine. I spent a lot of time there. It's where you get lost in your mind. It's where you get lost in your self-talk, whether it be rational or irrational. And I get a visit from my mom, who I hadn't seen in a couple years. And when she comes in, they come to get me. And when you're in solitary confinement, you come out of the hole to the visiting room, and it's no human contact usually. But when you go to a visit, they put a belly chain on you, and they put shackles on you and handcuffs. And I walk out there, and I see my mom, and there's a tear coming down her eye, and I look at my mom, and I get mad. I get mad because I think she's pitying me. And I'm not a person that really takes pity really well. And so I just start raising my voice and speaking real loud and telling her, listen, Mom, these people can't do nothing to me. Don't cry for me. Man, they're not hurting me. They're hurting themselves. Because my brother's going to do some stuff out there for me. And she just stands there quiet, not saying anything, until I get quiet, and I look at her, and she just shakes her head, and she says, Stanley, when are you going to grow up? When are you going to grow up? And I kind of laughed. I said, what are you talking about, Mom? I'm almost 30 years old. I'm doing life in prison. I'm one of the leaders of the most notorious gangs in prison. I run things. How much more grown you want me to be? What else do you want me to do? And she says, Stanley, you're doing the same thing you were doing when you were 13 years old. You're fighting. You're doing drugs. You're leading gang members. What's different? What's different? So I'm kind of offended at that point. My pride is kind of crushed. I'm just tore up inside, and I don't understand what's going on right now. And Mom, grab me a sandwich. And she gets me a sandwich. I stay out there for about a half hour. I go back to the hole, and I get to pacing in the hole, and man, I'm just not understanding things right now. It's not going the way it usually goes. I usually don't care. You know, I sit back there, I read, Lewis Lamar books, I pound on the wall, I scream, just cause chaos. I was sitting quiet in my cell, I was getting up, I was pacing. All I could think of is this guy in my life that was like a father figure, because my father had passed away, leaving me. My mom confronting me and telling me that I wasn't grown, that I was still a kid. And the question that she asked me, what was different? What's different now than when you were 13 years old? And the only answer I could come up with, I was in prison. I was in prison. That's the only difference from the 13-year-old to the 30-year-old. That's a sad state. And I thought about that, and I really believe that was the first point of God peeling a scale from my heart. I really believe it was the first time that God kind of made me look at life differently. So I came out of the hole, and JB, we called him Shorty Hitler. He came up and he asked me, he said, so you ready to go to the weekend? Man, it's coming up in a couple weeks. And I said, yeah, if you'll leave me alone after I go through the weekend, I'll go through the weekend. Well, he was in a dilemma because at Marion, you could only sponsor one guy, and he had already sponsored one guy because he didn't think I was going to give in. And so he talked to the warden at the time, and the warden said, I've never sponsored anybody. I don't know. And he said, well, if an inmate can sponsor it, surely a warden can sponsor it. So she ended up sponsoring me. And I ended up going the first day, and you hear all the stories down the hallway. Man, it's great food. It's a whole bunch of great Kool-Aid. There's coffee. Man, you love. I'll be there. I'll be there. And I need you to know. When I was going to the weekend, I was still a heathen. So some of the things you're going to hear, I was still a heathen. Right before I went, I smoked some weed. I got high because I wanted to have my munchie on when I went to Kairos Weekend. I wanted to make sure I was going to be able to eat as much as I could eat. So I go to that first night. A big guy, man, bless his heart. He passed away several years ago, Les Ackerman, from Toledo, Ohio. He came up to me and gave me a big hug, and he said, welcome, brother, and I kind of pushed him away, and I said, hi. I didn't like people up on me. I wasn't on all that. I didn't do the affection thing. We sat down. I ate a whole bunch of cookies, drank a whole bunch of coffee. And the perk was, when I left that night, I got a brown bag of cookies to take to the cell with me. And that's all I got out of that weekend, that day. That's all I got out of it. So I decided I wasn't going to go back. So when I walked out of the door, and JB was standing outside the door in the hallway, and he said, man, how was it? I said, man, the cookies were great. The coffee was great. I'm good. He said, what do you mean? I said, I'm not going back. He said, no, you got to go back. I said, no, I don't have to do nothing. I said, remember, you left the gang. You can't tell me nothing. And I walk away. And I go back to my cell, and I smoke some more weed, and I eat some more cookies, and all of a sudden a guard comes and he knocks on my door of my cell. And I kind of freak out because I got stuff in there I don't want him to see. And I go to the door. I'm like, what's up? He says, you got a phone call. I said, no, I don't have a phone call. I'm an inmate. Inmates don't get phone calls. He said, yeah, you got a phone call. I said, I'm not getting on the phone. He said, it's a direct order. You're going to get on the phone or you're going to go to the hole. And I'm like, man, I got these cookies. I got this stuff. So I went down to the desk and remember who I was in the institution at that point. So if you get on the phone, you're either the police or you're the inmate police. And man, I could never be looked at like that. So I was torn at that point because I'm like, man, who wants me on this phone, man? I can't let these dudes see me on. I say, no, I'm not getting on the phone. And the CO, he goes to pull out his handcuffs. He says, it's a direct order. You either do that or you go to the hole. And man, I reluctantly picked up the phone, and it was the warden. I said, hello. She said, I heard you're not going back to the weekend. What the heck, man? How did you find that out? She said, well, I know everything. She said, I would count it as a personal favor if you would just go back to the weekend. And Alan, you can back me up. Any inmate in the world wants a personal favor from a warden. All right, man. So I decided to go back. And the thing about that was I went back and I was just thinking about the food. I was thinking about what I was going to be able to eat, all of that. I didn't really realize the food that I was going to be fed. And no matter who it is or how you come to those weekends, as volunteers, please remember that. Because sometimes I know it has to be frustrated, and I know I was very frustrating to the guys. I was difficult. I was difficult, to say the least. So I go back, Saturday night comes, and on that Saturday night, that forgiveness talk, and you know, all of the stuff that's happened in my life up to that point was kind of, it was, God's got a process. Just like Kairos has a process for a weekend. You know, you stay within the riverbanks, you do this, and this, and God works. Well, God does that too in our lives, and He did it in my life, and it was an amazing thing because He led me up to that Saturday night, and I went up there. And I heard a brother talk that tore my heart out. I heard a brother talk about his father being a deputy sheriff and pulling a guy over for a routine traffic stop. And the guy wrestling him down, taking his gun from him and killing him. Driving away and not being caught for weeks. And then he said the words that resonated in my spirit, and really I think it was those words that quickened the spirit in me, that opened my eyes, that wow. Because he said, I forgave that man. I forgave that man for who he took out of my life. But more than that, I forgave that man for who he took out of my son's life. But more than that, I forgave that man who he took out of his grandson's life, those who come behind him, took him from their graduations, their weddings, their every aspect of our lives. I forgave that man. And I'm sitting up there and I'm feeling so convicted for the life that I took, for the people's lives that I affected. And I had never really thought of who all I affected until he started talking about it. And then he started talking about this forgiveness. And he said, okay, when you leave this night, you're going to be given an extra bag of brown cookies. And he said, these extra bag of brown cookies are for that person that comes to your mind that's unforgivable in your mind. That person that you hate, that you can't stand. And as soon as he says it, a guy's, name comes to my mind. And if you've seen the Cookie Saves Life video, I speak about it in that, man. And I encourage you to watch it. And I'll go over that part because it's the next part that really affected me. Because accepting Christ on my weekend, when I knelt back in the back with Brother Jim Driscoll, and he led me to Christ right there on October 31st, 1999, I gave my life to Christ. And it was after that when I went back to my cell and I went back to my cell and I called my mom. I hadn't talked to her in a while, and I called my mom and I said, Mom, man, I went through something that was so beautiful. I want you to go through it. I said, there's a weekend that you can go through. I want you to experience this beautiful thing that I experienced. And she accepted to go through that beautiful thing. And that's what my wife is here to talk about. She's here to talk about a little bit about that beautiful thing.
Thank you. That weekend, I was invited to the Kairos Outside graduation. That Stan's mom, Stella, had been serving on her first team. My aunt invited me to go to the closing because I had just been on my street weekend, Cum Christo, and we were supporting a woman who had a son that was incarcerated. She was leaving the weekend. The joy and the confidence and the Holy Spirit was filled in that place. You could see the transformation on those wounded, broken women. That's a whole nother story of the isolation and the rejection, just like in the talks that you truly do feel. It's a family when you serve on a weekend, when you meet those other women that have the same struggle. I served, I was asked to be on team, and because I did my street weekend and I was asked to be on a team because I was like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? So I served on a team and I said, it's going to be kind of fun, but if I get assigned to talk, I'm not doing it. I'm quitting. So the next day I was going to visit Stan, and I said, it's good. I said, but if I get a talk, I'm quitting. He's like, well, you can say that, but you can't say no to God. Went back to the next team formation, and I was assigned to talk. But you know what? Through that transparency and vulnerability, more walls just get broken down, and just more joy and more confidence can shine through. And Stan was at Marion Correctional the whole time, and so it was a little bit different, but the same. The talks and the relationships that are restored between daughters and mothers and sisters is incredible. You watch the miracles right in front of you. A few years after that, then I was chosen to lead a weekend, and wow, what a huge responsibility, but what an awesome blessing. And that changed my life. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful for my Kairos family. Yeah, that's it.
It's because of what God has done in her life that she stands in front of you right now. She has worth and confidence that only God can provide to people. So after, as that goes on, I'm serving in a capacity with Torch. We were doing Torch, and man, she spoke about it. She said the mentoring part, and that was the most fulfilling, the most wonderful, that's the thing that as you guys were serving, we were serving inside for Torch. We were doing the peer-to-peer Torch. And it was something that allowed us, that were given an empowerment. Empowerment does a great thing, especially for men inside that don't think they can help anymore, they can do anything anymore. But when Torch came in, it gave me the capability to make sure the life that I took was not taken in vain. Because that's what my mentoring is. The passion is driven by the crime that I did and the life that I took to try and affect those young men's lives in a way that they will not commit the crime that I committed. And through all of that, I was given a chance to be released. But a few years before that, a program was started. It's called Embark, and Embark's a ministry that it supports all of those who you put through Kairos. We grab some of them, they grab some of them, and they walk with them before their release, and then they walk with them after their release. We're a reentry ministry. And so I was released in October. I never thought it would happen. When I heard the board say that I had a parole, I heard God say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And just like the beginning song, it was awesome. Man, I miss my mom. It's the support around me that has walked with me since my release. I got out a couple months later. I was interviewing for a couple jobs and a couple manufacturers. They knew me. I had networked with them while I was inside, and when upon my release, they wanted me to come work for them. And God puts people in your life that does amazing things. And so the same warden that sponsored me for that Kairos weekend, she was faithful to Kairos. She was faithful. She was now the executive director of Embark. And yeah. So she calls me into the office and she says, "Come to the office." She says, come in my office. And I'm like, dang, I'm in trouble again. Jeez. She said, just come in the office. I go in the office. She shuts the door and tells me to sit down. I'm like, dang. She slides a paper in front of me. And man, I really want you to understand, I'm out of prison less than 2 months after doing 400 months. 33 years and 4 months I did in prison, incarcerated. I had never had an adult day on the street. I had never walked on the street as an adult. She calls me in her office and she slides a paper in front of me and she says, read that. And I read it and I'm like, man, that's awesome. That's kind of a cool job. She said, it's yours if you want it. And man, it was my dream job. It's a job that I did inside because I supported the men inside. I supported Kairos. I supported Torch. I supported Kairos Outside. I supported Promise Keepers. I supported all of these other Gideon, all of these other ministries that were in there. Man, I was there for them. I wanted to help. I needed to do what God wanted me to do. And when I was offered this job and given this chance to help the men and women coming out of prison find a job, find a house, find support, listen, I didn't know how to do self-checkout. It's crazy. I walk into the store and we go up to the thing and they're like, yeah, I'm like, how do they make any money? They're like, oh, they got cameras all over. I'm like, okay. But man, what Kairos is doing inside, man, it's unmatched. There's nothing that anybody can say that is not God that's part of Kairos. It is something that helps men understand things are bigger than them. It helps men and women understand that everything's not about you. It helps men and women understand that, man, I'm not the most important person. And my mom said it in one of her testimonies, one of the very few testimonies that she gave. She looked at me and she said, Stanley, you know that you've been the number one person in my life since your father died. But I know you'll understand that you're no longer the number one person in my life anymore. That Jesus Christ is the number one in my life now. Man, so blessing upon blessing, blessing on blessing. Man, please continue what you're doing. Man, if you ever want to get a hold of me, stan.stever@conway.org. It's real easy to get a hold of me. Man, please, I love you, brothers and sisters, man. You guys saved my life, and you saved so many, Alan's life. You saved so many lives. What you do right now. Thank you.